The assignment seemed simple enough when the Galactic Council handed it to me. Observe human combat behavior during their ongoing conflict with the Zephyrian Empire. Document their tactics, analyze their strategies, and report back with recommendations for potential alliance considerations. My species, the Kethvar, had served as neutral observers for centuries. We prided ourselves on our objectivity, our ability to remain detached from the primitive emotions that drove lesser species to war. I was confident in my abilities. After all, I had observed 17 different species in combat scenarios. The brutal efficiency of the Krex warriors, the hive-mind coordination of the Stellan clusters, the technological superiority of the Vorthak fleet commanders. Each had their strengths, their particular approaches to warfare that made them formidable in their own right. Humans, according to preliminary reports, were a young species barely 3 centuries into space travel. How dangerous could they really be? The transport ship delivered me to the edge of human space just as the latest skirmish was beginning. The Zephyrians had launched what they called a cleansing operation against a human colony world designated as Kepler 442b. Intelligence suggested it was a minor agricultural world, populated by perhaps 50,000 humans engaged in terraforming operations. The Zephyrian force consisted of 12 heavy cruisers, 47 destroyers, and over 200 fighter craft. Standard doctrine called for orbital bombardment followed by ground occupation. Clean, efficient, overwhelming. I settled into my observation post aboard the neutral vessel Witness of Truth, configuring my recording equipment and preparing my analysis matrices. The Zephyrian fleet moved with practiced precision, their formations textbook perfect as they approached the human world. Their commander, a decorated veteran named Thexval, had personally overseen 43 successful planetary conquests. This should have been routine. The first indication that something was wrong came when the human colony failed to respond to the Zephyrian surrender demands. No panic transmissions, no desperate pleas for mercy, no attempts at negotiation. Just silence. Thexval interpreted this as primitive defiance and proceeded with the assault plan. His ships moved into bombardment formation, targeting the major population centers that orbital scans had identified. That's when the humans struck back. What emerged from the planet's surface defied every tactical manual I had ever studied. Instead of the expected defense platforms or fighter squadrons, hundreds of small craft launched simultaneously from hidden positions across the planet. They weren't proper military vessels by any standard classification. Agricultural haulers, mining transports, even civilian shuttles had been hastily retrofitted with weapons systems that should never have fit on such small frames. The Zephyrian admiral actually laughed when his sensors officer reported the launch. I recorded his exact words: "They send farmers against the might of the Empire? This will be over before it begins." He was wrong. The human craft moved unlike anything I had witnessed before. They didn't maintain formations or follow predictable attack patterns. Instead, they swarmed through space like angry insects, each pilot apparently operating independently yet somehow coordinating with devastating effect. They targeted not the heavily armored frontal sections of the Zephyrian ships, but instead focused their attacks on sensor arrays, weapon hardpoints, and engine components. A single human transport, its hull scarred from years of hauling grain, somehow managed to slip past the point defense systems of a Zephyrian destroyer and rammed directly into its main sensor dish. The explosion was minimal, barely scratching the destroyer's armor, but the loss of sensors left the massive ship effectively blind. Within moments, a dozen other human craft swarmed the crippled vessel, their improvised weapons finding every weak point in its design. I watched in fascination as the destroyer's crew attempted to respond to this unconventional attack. Their training had prepared them for fleet engagements, for the honorable clash of equal forces following established rules of warfare. They had no protocols for dealing with what appeared to be suicidal farmers willing to sacrifice themselves for minimal tactical gains. But the humans weren't suicidal. They were precise. Every seemingly desperate attack served a greater purpose. The transport that destroyed the sensor array had been piloted by a former military engineer who knew exactly which components would cause maximum disruption. The follow-up attacks weren't random but carefully coordinated strikes designed to exploit the vulnerabilities he had created. Within an hour, 3 Zephyrian destroyers had been disabled by craft that shouldn't have been capable of threatening a patrol boat. The true horror began when the Zephyrians attempted to withdraw to a safer distance. The human craft pursued them relentlessly, using the debris field from the initial engagement as cover. They moved through the wreckage like it was their natural environment, appearing and disappearing among the twisted metal with fluid grace. Several times I watched human pilots perform maneuvers that should have been impossible, threading their craft through gaps barely wider than their hulls while maintaining fire on their targets. Admiral Fexval ordered a general retreat, but the humans had anticipated this. More craft launched from the planet, these ones clearly purpose-built for combat. Sleek fighters emerged from what the initial scans had identified as grain silos. The agricultural world had been a facade, a carefully constructed trap baited with the appearance of helplessness. As the Zephyrian fleet limped away from Kepler 442b, leaving behind nearly a third of their vessels, I realized that my comfortable assumptions about human warfare capabilities had been completely wrong. These weren't the desperate actions of a primitive species fighting for survival. This was something far more dangerous, a species that had turned deception and adaptation into an art form. My preliminary report to the Galactic Council would need significant revision. The humans weren't just another young species stumbling through their first galactic conflicts. They were something entirely different, something that challenged every established principle of interstellar warfare. As I reviewed the combat footage, analyzing the human tactics and strategies, a chill ran through my neural pathways. If this was how they fought when defending a single agricultural world, what would they be capable of when truly threatened? What depths of cunning and violence lay hidden beneath their seemingly primitive exterior? I was beginning to understand that my assignment might be far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. The humans had revealed only the smallest fraction of their capabilities in this engagement, and already they had shattered a veteran Zephyrian fleet through pure tactical brilliance. What other surprises were they keeping hidden? As my ship prepared to follow the human fleet to their next engagement, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to witness something that would fundamentally change my understanding of warfare itself. The Galactic Council had sent me to observe humans in combat. Now, as I watched the debris of Zephyrian ships drift through space around what should have been an easy conquest, I was beginning to wish I had never accepted this assignment. 3 days after the disaster at Kepler 442b, I received new orders from the Galactic Council. They wanted a deeper analysis of human combat psychology, particularly their apparent willingness to sacrifice individual units for tactical advantages. The preliminary data I had transmitted had caused significant concern among the council members. Several species were now questioning their earlier assessments of human military capabilities. My next observation point would be more dangerous. Instead of maintaining safe distance aboard a neutral vessel, I was to embed with a Zephyrian reconnaissance unit tasked with tracking a human patrol fleet. The Empire's military leadership believed that the agricultural world had been an anomaly, a lucky ambush that wouldn't reflect standard human operational procedures. They were determined to prove that in open space, traditional tactics would prevail. I transferred to the Zephyrian light cruiser Dominant Claw, commanded by Captain Vextar, a methodical officer who specialized in deep space reconnaissance. His ship was equipped with the most advanced sensor systems in the Empire, capable of detecting and analyzing enemy movements from extreme range. The plan was to shadow the human fleet, document their patrol patterns, and identify weaknesses that could be exploited in future engagements. The human fleet we were tracking consisted of 7 vessels, 2 frigates, 3 destroyers, and 2 ships of unknown configuration that appeared to be modified cargo haulers. According to Zephyrian intelligence, this represented a standard human patrol group, operating in the disputed Centauri Reach where several resource-rich systems remained contested. What became immediately apparent was that human patrol patterns defied every principle of naval doctrine. Instead of maintaining formation and following predictable routes between strategic points, they moved in constantly shifting configurations. Ships would separate without apparent reason, rejoin the group from unexpected vectors, and occasionally disappear entirely from sensors for hours at a time. Captain Vextar initially attributed this to poor discipline and inadequate training. Primitive species often struggle with basic fleet coordination, he explained to me as we watched the human ships scatter across 3 different star systems. Their lack of military tradition shows in every maneuver. But, as the days passed, a more disturbing pattern emerged. The humans weren't moving randomly. They were hunting. The first sign came when one of our long-range sensor drones simply vanished. It had been positioned in the outer asteroid belt of the Proxima Centauri system, passively monitoring human communications traffic. One moment it was transmitting normal data, the next it was gone. No explosion signature, no debris field, just empty space where a sophisticated piece of technology had been moments before. Captain Vextar ordered enhanced security protocols and repositioned our remaining surveillance assets. Within 6 hours, 2 more drones had disappeared. Each time, there was no indication of how they had been detected or destroyed. The humans continued their seemingly erratic patrol patterns as if nothing had happened. It was on the 4th day that I witnessed something that challenged my understanding of physics itself. One of the human destroyers, designated Fighting Falcon according to intercepted transmissions, appeared to be conducting routine maintenance operations near a small asteroid. Our sensors showed the ship stationary, power levels reduced, with several small maintenance craft working on its hull. Captain Vextar decided this represented an opportunity. A disabled human warship would be an ideal target for close observation. He ordered the Dominant Claw to move within detailed scanning range while maintaining stealth protocols. We were 3,000 kilometers away when the asteroid exploded. But it wasn't an explosion in any conventional sense. The rocky surface simply fell away, revealing that the entire asteroid had been hollowed out and converted into a massive weapons platform. Energy beams lanced out from concealed emplacements, targeting our ship with pinpoint accuracy. The Fighting Falcon, which our sensors had identified as disabled, suddenly blazed with full power and began moving with acceleration that should have been impossible for a ship of its mass. Captain Vextar shouted orders to his crew as the Dominant Claw attempted evasive maneuvers. But the humans had planned for this. Every escape route had been anticipated, every possible response calculated and countered. The asteroid base tracked our movements perfectly while the destroyer closed from another angle, boxing us in with tactical precision that bordered on prescience. What followed was not a battle but a demonstration. The humans could have destroyed us at any moment, but instead they systematically disabled our weapons, sensors, and propulsion systems with surgical strikes. Each hit was placed with mathematical precision, neutralizing specific capabilities while leaving our life support and communication systems intact. The message was clear: we were being allowed to survive for a reason. When the Fighting Falcon finally moved alongside our crippled ship, I expected boarding parties and interrogation. Instead, a single communication channel opened. The voice that emerged spoke perfect Zephyrian with only a slight accent. "Captain Vextar, this is Commander Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. Your ship has been broadcasting detailed intelligence about our patrol routes to Empire Command for 4 days. We have been monitoring your transmissions and adjusting our operations accordingly." The captain's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Impossible. Our communications are encrypted with quantum-level security protocols." Commander Chen's laugh was genuinely amused. "Captain, we've been breaking your quantum encryption since before you left port. Every message you've sent, every tactical analysis you've transmitted, we've been reading in real time. Your Empire's intelligence services now have a complete and detailed report about our patrol capabilities. Unfortunately for you, every piece of that intelligence is deliberately false." The full scope of human deception began to dawn on me as Chen continued her explanation. The scattered patrol patterns, the seemingly random movements, the maintenance operations near the asteroid, everything had been carefully orchestrated to create a specific impression in Zephyrian minds. The Empire's commanders now believed they understood human tactics and capabilities, but their understanding was based entirely on manufactured data. "The asteroid base you just encountered," Chen said, "was built specifically for this demonstration. We knew you were watching us, so we gave you something worth watching. Your military planners will now factor our apparent reliance on hidden installations into their strategies. They will waste considerable resources searching for bases that don't exist and planning countermeasures for tactics we will never use." Captain Vextar's voice was barely controlled. "Why are you telling us this? Why reveal your deception?" "Because," Chen replied, "we want you to return to your empire with this knowledge. We want your commanders to understand that they have been outmaneuvered at every level. The question they need to ask themselves is this: if we can so thoroughly deceive their intelligence operations during peacetime patrols, what will we be capable of during actual warfare?" As the human fleet departed, leaving us with just enough power to limp back to Empire space, I realized that I was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans weren't just fighting a war, they were conducting a complex psychological campaign designed to undermine their enemy's confidence and decision-making capabilities. Every engagement, every encounter, every seemingly random skirmish was part of a larger strategy that operated on multiple levels simultaneously. While Zephyrian commanders focused on immediate tactical concerns, the humans were playing a game that encompassed intelligence warfare, psychological manipulation, and strategic deception on a scale that boggled the mind. As I compiled my report for the Galactic Council, a disturbing realization began to take shape. If the humans could orchestrate such elaborate deceptions during minor patrol operations, what were they really planning? What was the true scope of their strategic thinking? I was beginning to suspect that everything the galaxy thought it knew about human capabilities and intentions might be carefully constructed illusions designed to serve purposes we couldn't even begin to comprehend. The Galactic Council's emergency session convened exactly 1 week after my report on the human deception operations reached the capital. Representatives from 47 species gathered in the Great Chamber, their various forms of agitation filling the air with clicking, chittering, and electromagnetic disturbances. My observations had shattered several fundamental assumptions about human warfare capabilities, and the implications were causing panic across multiple governments. Council Director Zefkos, an ancient Valerian whose crystalline form pulsed with nervous energy, addressed the assembly directly. Observer Kethvar has provided disturbing evidence that the humans may possess strategic thinking capabilities far beyond our initial assessments. We require immediate confirmation of these findings before taking any diplomatic action. The assignment they gave me was both an honor and, what I was beginning to suspect might be a death sentence. I was to observe human forces during what Empire intelligence believed would be the decisive battle of the current conflict. The Zephyrians had assembled their most powerful fleet, over 300 vessels including their flagship Eternal Dominion, and were preparing to strike at the human capital world of New Geneva. This time, I would observe from the Zephyrian flagship itself, embedded with Supreme Admiral Korksvel and his command staff. The Empire's leadership wanted neutral documentation of their victory, proof that human trickery could not overcome overwhelming force applied with proper military precision. The Eternal Dominion was a monument to Zephyrian military engineering. Nearly 8 kilometers long and, armed with weapons capable of cracking planets, it served as both command vessel and symbol of imperial power. Its bridge was a marvel of tactical coordination, with hundreds of officers monitoring every aspect of fleet operations through real-time holographic displays. Supreme Admiral Korksvel was everything a Zephyrian military commander should be: methodical, experienced, and absolutely convinced of his own superiority. He had spent decades studying human tactics, analyzing their previous engagements, and developing what he believed were foolproof countermeasures to their unconventional strategies. The humans rely on deception because they lack the strength for direct confrontation, he explained to me as his fleet approached the New Geneva system. When faced with overwhelming force, their tricks become irrelevant. Today we will demonstrate the futility of fighting against proper military doctrine. The human defenses around New Geneva appeared exactly as Zephyrian intelligence had predicted. Orbital platforms, defensive satellites, and a fleet of perhaps 70 vessels arranged in textbook defensive formations. The numbers were heavily in the Empire's favor, exactly as military planners had calculated. This should have been a straightforward demonstration of superior firepower. The battle began conventionally enough. Zephyrian forces deployed in standard attack formations while human defenders moved to intercept. Long-range weapons exchanged fire across millions of kilometers, with both sides maneuvering for tactical advantage. For the first hour, everything proceeded exactly according to established naval warfare principles. Then, the humans did something impossible. Without any apparent signal or coordination, every human vessel simultaneously reversed course and began retreating toward the planet. Not a fighting withdrawal or a tactical repositioning, but what appeared to be a full retreat in the face of superior numbers. Admiral Korksvel ordered immediate pursuit, convinced that the human will to fight had finally broken. That's when the real battle began. As the Zephyrian fleet accelerated toward the planet, space around them began to change. What had appeared to be empty vacuum was suddenly filled with objects that defied sensor classification. Massive structures materialized from nowhere, revealing themselves as they powered up weapons systems that shouldn't have existed. The humans hadn't just hidden bases in asteroids. They had somehow concealed entire battle stations in what appeared to be empty space. Stealth technology advanced beyond anything in galactic databases allowed fortifications the size of cities to remain completely invisible until they chose to reveal themselves. Admiral Korksvel's confident expression cracked as his tactical displays lit up with thousands of new contacts. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his sensor officers. "Our scans showed nothing but planetary defense platforms." The answer came in the form of a human transmission broadcast on all frequencies. The voice belonged to Fleet Admiral Marcus Rivera, the legendary commander who had never lost a battle in 30 years of service. "Admiral Korksvel, welcome to New Geneva. You're probably wondering how we managed to hide 300 defensive installations from your sensors. The answer is simple: we didn't hide them from your sensors. We hid them from your perception. As Rivera spoke, the tactical situation continued to deteriorate for the Zephyrian fleet. The hidden battle stations weren't just firing conventional weapons. They were deploying technologies that violated several supposedly fundamental laws of physics. Gravitational weapons twisted spacetime itself, creating zones where Zephyrian ships found themselves moving backward despite applying forward thrust. Energy fields appeared that seemed to absorb incoming fire and redirect it at other targets. Your intelligence services, Rivera continued, have been very thorough in their analysis of our defensive capabilities. They've studied our weapons, our tactics, our deployment patterns. Unfortunately, they've been studying our training exercises, not our actual military assets. The horrible truth was becoming clear. Every piece of intelligence the Empire had gathered about human military capabilities had been carefully crafted misinformation. The humans had been running elaborate mock battles for years, allowing Zephyrian spies to observe and record what appeared to be their maximum defensive capabilities. Meanwhile, their real military assets had remained completely hidden. Admiral Corksville ordered an immediate retreat, but escape was no longer possible. The human battle stations had deployed some form of interdiction field that prevented faster-than-light travel within the system. The Zephyrian fleet, designed for overwhelming assault, found itself trapped in a defensive maze specifically engineered to neutralize their tactical advantages. What followed wasn't a battle but a systematic demonstration of technological supremacy. Human forces didn't attempt to destroy the Zephyrian fleet, but instead disabled it ship by ship with weapons that seemed to operate on principles completely unknown to galactic science. Crews were left alive and unharmed while their vessels were reduced to powered but helpless hulks. The Eternal Dominion was the last ship to be neutralized. As human boarding teams prepared to come aboard, Admiral Corksville turned to me with an expression of complete bewilderment. "How did we miss it?" he asked. "How did an entire civilization develop such advanced technology without any of our intelligence networks detecting it?" Fleet Admiral Rivera answered that question personally when he arrived on the bridge. He was a surprisingly small human, unremarkable in appearance except for eyes that seemed to contain depths of strategic thinking that I was only beginning to comprehend. "The answer, Admiral, is that you never understood what you were looking at. Your intelligence services observed our technology and classified it according to your own understanding of physical principles. When you saw something that didn't fit your models, you assumed it was primitive or defective rather than advanced beyond your comprehension." Rivera gestured toward the tactical displays still showing the impossible battle stations surrounding the planet. "Every piece of technology you've witnessed today has been in operation for decades. We didn't suddenly develop these capabilities. We simply allowed you to misunderstand what you were observing." As I recorded Rivera's words, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. The humans hadn't just been preparing for war. They had been conducting a decades-long intelligence operation designed to ensure that when war came, their enemies would be completely unprepared for the reality of human military capabilities. The scope of their deception was staggering. Not just individual battles or tactical engagements, but the fundamental assumptions that guided galactic military thinking had been deliberately shaped by human misinformation. Every species in the galaxy, including my own, had been building their defense strategies based on a completely false understanding of what humans were capable of. As human forces began the process of escorting the defeated Zephyrian fleet to internment facilities, I realized that I was witnessing something far more significant than a military victory. The humans had just revealed that they possessed not only advanced technology but also the strategic patience to execute plans that span decades. What other long-term strategies were they implementing? What other assumptions about human society and capabilities were based on carefully constructed illusions? As my transport prepared to carry news of this defeat back to the Galactic Council, I couldn't escape the growing certainty that everything we thought we knew about humanity was wrong. The aftermath of the New Geneva battle sent shockwaves through galactic civilization that extended far beyond military circles. Within days of my report reaching the Galactic Council, 7 different species had requested emergency diplomatic meetings with human representatives. 3 minor empires had unilaterally declared neutrality in the human-Zephyrian conflict. The carefully maintained balance of power that had existed for centuries was crumbling as governments realized they had completely misjudged humanity's place in the galactic hierarchy. But the humans weren't finished with their revelations. My new assignment came directly from the Council's Emergency Committee: observe human diplomatic capabilities during the peace negotiations that were now inevitable. The Zephyrian Empire, facing the total destruction of their primary fleet and the revelation that their intelligence services had been compromised for decades, had requested immediate cessation of hostilities. The peace talks were scheduled to take place on Sanctuary Station, a neutral facility that had hosted diplomatic meetings for over 400 years. Representatives from 12 different species would attend as observers, ensuring that any agreements reached would be witnessed by the broader galactic community. I arrived expecting to observe standard diplomatic procedures: lengthy negotiations, careful positioning, the gradual compromise between opposing positions that characterized interstellar diplomacy. What I witnessed instead was a masterclass in strategic communication that left veteran diplomats questioning everything they thought they knew about negotiation. The human delegation consisted of only 3 individuals, led by Ambassador Elena Vasquez, a slight woman whose unremarkable appearance concealed what I was beginning to recognize as the characteristically deceptive nature of human presentation. She was accompanied by a military advisor, Colonel James Park, and a civilian specialist whose role was not immediately clear. Supreme Admiral Corksvell led the Zephyrian delegation, his once proud bearing now subdued by the humiliation of his fleet's defeat. He brought with him a full retinue of military advisors, legal experts, and territorial specialists, clearly expecting complex negotiations over territorial boundaries, reparation payments, and prisoner exchanges. Ambassador Vasquez opened the proceedings with a statement that stunned the assembled delegates. The Terran Federation has no interest in territorial conquest, reparation payments, or prisoner exchanges, she announced. We propose instead a complete restructuring of interstellar relations based on principles that will prevent future conflicts from developing. Admiral Corksvell's mandibles clicked in confusion. What are your terms for peace? We don't have terms, Vasquez replied calmly. We have an offer. What she presented wasn't a peace treaty but a comprehensive plan for galactic integration that addressed economic, technological, and security concerns across all inhabited systems. Instead of demanding concessions from the defeated Zephyrian Empire, the humans proposed sharing advanced technologies with all species willing to adopt new frameworks for interstellar cooperation. The scope of what they were offering was breathtaking. Medical technologies that could extend lifespans for most carbon-based species. Energy generation systems that could power entire civilizations without depleting planetary resources. Transportation networks that would reduce interstellar travel times by orders of magnitude. They weren't negotiating from a position of strength, they were revealing that they possessed solutions to problems that had plagued galactic civilization for millennia. But the true brilliance of their diplomatic strategy became apparent when other delegates began asking detailed questions about these technologies. Ambassador Vasquez's responses revealed that the humans had been studying every species in the galaxy for decades, identifying their specific needs and developing targeted solutions. For the water-dependent Aquari, they offered atmospheric processors that could create perfect aquatic environments on any planet. For the hive-minded Stellants, they presented communication technologies that could link individual nodes across interstellar distances without time delay. For the crystalline Valorians, they had developed energy matrices that could enhance their natural electromagnetic abilities. Each offer was perfectly calibrated to address that species' most pressing concerns, and each came with detailed technical specifications that proved the humans weren't making empty promises. They had actually developed these technologies and were prepared to share them freely. The Zephyrian admiral struggled to comprehend what he was hearing. Why would you offer such advantages to your enemies? Colonel Park answered that question with characteristic human directness. Because they won't be our enemies once they understand what we're really offering. War is inefficient. Cooperation is not. As the negotiations continued, I began to understand the true scope of human strategic thinking. They weren't just ending a war, they were restructuring galactic civilization itself. By offering technological advancement freely to all species, they were creating a new framework where military conflict would become economically and strategically obsolete. The civilian specialist, who introduced herself as Dr. Sarah Chen, presented data that demonstrated how interstellar warfare had been holding back technological and social development across the galaxy. Resources spent on military expansion could instead be devoted to exploration, research, and cultural exchange. The potential for advancement was exponential if species could overcome their territorial instincts. But the most disturbing revelation came when delegates began asking how long the humans had been planning this transformation. Dr. Chen's answer sent chills through the assembled representatives. We've been preparing for this moment since we first achieved interstellar flight, she explained. Every human colony was established with dual purposes, development and research. Every trade agreement included intelligence-gathering components. Every cultural exchange program was designed to better understand the needs and capabilities of our galactic neighbors. The humans had been executing a centuries-long plan to position themselves as indispensable partners rather than competitors. While other species had focused on traditional concepts of territorial expansion and resource acquisition, humanity had been building the foundation for a completely new form of interstellar civilization. Ambassador Vasquez presented the final component of their proposal, a galactic communication network that would allow instantaneous information sharing between all participating worlds. The technology was based on quantum entanglement principles that theoretically shouldn't have been scalable to interstellar distances, yet human demonstrations proved it was not only possible but already operational across human space. Information sharing eliminates most causes of interstellar conflict, she explained. Territorial disputes arise from uncertainty about resource availability. Cultural misunderstandings develop when species operate in isolation. Technical stagnation occurs when research isn't coordinated across civilizations. The implications were staggering. The proposed network would effectively end the possibility of large-scale deception between species while accelerating technological development beyond anything previously imagined. It would also make the kind of military buildup that had led to the current war practically impossible to conceal. As the formal negotiations concluded, Admiral Corksville approached Ambassador Vasquez privately. I was close enough to record their exchange. How long have you been planning this? He asked. Since before your species achieved spaceflight, she replied. We identified the pattern of galactic development centuries ago. Young species emerge, compete for resources, fight wars, eventually stagnate or destroy themselves. We decided to break that cycle. The Admiral's voice carried a note of something that might have been awe. You've been manipulating galactic development for centuries? Not manipulating, Vasquez corrected. Guiding. There's a difference. Manipulation serves the manipulator's interests. What we've been doing serves everyone's interests, including yours. As delegations prepared to return to their homeworlds with humanity's proposals, I realized that I had witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans hadn't just won a war, they had revealed a completely different approach to interstellar civilization. Instead of competing with other species, they had been preparing to elevate them. The question that haunted me as I prepared my final report was whether the galaxy would accept this transformation or resist it. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that made resistance potentially suicidal, but they had also offered benefits that made cooperation incredibly attractive. Either way, the old galactic order was finished. The humans had seen to that with typical efficiency and foresight. As I began documenting the full scope of their diplomatic revolution, I couldn't help but wonder what other surprises humanity had prepared for a galaxy that was just beginning to understand how completely it had underestimated them. 6 months after the peace negotiations concluded, I found myself standing in what had once been the Galactic Council chambers, watching as the last session of the old interstellar government formally dissolved itself. The transformation of galactic civilization had proceeded with breathtaking speed, driven by the irresistible appeal of human technological offerings and the growing realization that resistance was not just futile but counterproductive. 41 of 47 member species had voted to join the new cooperative framework that humanity had proposed. The remaining 6 had declared themselves neutral observers, neither joining nor opposing the new system. Not a single species had chosen active resistance after witnessing what happened to those who tried. The hegemonic alliance of Rigel had been the first to test human resolve. 3 species led by the militant Kreks had formed a coalition dedicated to preventing what they called human contamination of galactic civilization. Their combined fleets, numbering over 1,000 vessels, had moved to blockade human trade routes and demonstrate that the old ways of territorial control still had relevance. The human response had been swift and devastating. Not military action, but something far more effective. They had simply activated dormant systems that had apparently been in place for decades. Every Kreks colony world simultaneously lost power, communications, and transportation capabilities. Not through attack, but through the shutdown of infrastructure that the Kreks had unknowingly been dependent upon for generations. The revelation that human technology had been quietly integrated into the basic systems of civilizations across the galaxy sent shockwaves through every government. Trade networks, communication systems, even basic life support on many worlds relied on components that humanity had provided through seemingly innocent commercial arrangements spanning centuries. Ambassador Vasquez's explanation to the emergency assembly had been characteristically direct: "We've never hidden our involvement in galactic infrastructure development. Every trade agreement was public. Every technology transfer was documented. You simply never realized how dependent you had become on our support." The Krex coalition had collapsed within days, their leaders forced to request humanitarian assistance as their worlds faced systematic failure. The humans had provided that assistance immediately and, without conditions, but the message was clear: galactic civilization now existed at humanity's discretion. My final assignment from the dissolving council was to document the transition process and assess the long-term implications of human leadership. What I discovered exceeded even my expanded expectations of their strategic sophistication. The humans hadn't just prepared to lead galactic civilization. They had been actively shaping its development for over 3 centuries, guiding other species toward technological and social frameworks that would make peaceful integration not just possible but inevitable. Dr. Sarah Chen, now serving as Director of Transition Coordination, provided me with access to archives that revealed the true scope of human planning. They had identified the fundamental problems that led to interstellar conflict and had systematically developed solutions over multiple generations. The cycle was predictable, she explained as we reviewed centuries of carefully maintained records. Species develop spaceflight, encounter other civilizations, compete for resources, fight wars, eventually exhaust themselves through conflict. We saw this pattern emerging and decided to break it by changing the basic parameters that drive competition. The archives contain detailed profiles of every known species, including psychological analyses, cultural assessments, and technological capability projections dating back to first contact. The humans had been studying galactic civilization like an enormous sociological experiment, identifying pressure points and intervention opportunities that could guide development toward cooperation rather than conflict. Every major technological breakthrough that had shaped recent galactic history could be traced back to human influence.